Hey, Husker fans, welcome back to the Husker Big Red YouTube channel with another podcast episode here on Friday. It's Chris Peterson, and with my co host, as always, Danny Gillette here of the HuskerBigRed.com. And we're going to talk about some good recruiting news for Nebraska football, getting a commitment from one of the top players, Ashton Murphy, in the state. We have some new offers coming out this week, some guys visiting. So a little bit more to talk about there. Also, some interesting stuff that came out in some press conferences this week, I think, from Matt Rule. He had some interesting comments about Garrett McGuire, which maybe give some insight as to why some of these in-state recruits at receiver maybe are trending the wrong way. And then also a lot of news on the basketball front. Baseball's got a big series this weekend against Northwestern, so a lot going on. We'll start though. Danny, how are you feeling this Friday morning?
Good. A little bit more reassured than last week. We were a little bit worried about the football recruits trending in the wrong direction, and we were kind of wondering, basketball, wake up, let's do something. And, that's what they did this week. So feeling a little bit more reassured, a little bit better, and it's Friday, so I really can't complain too much.
It was a good week, or at least it's been a better week so far for Nebraska. I know a lot of people gave me heat, on social media when I was, had my articles, and it's not like I was trying to say that it's been a negative trend since Matt Rule got hired. I mean, Matt Rule, since he got hired, has done a good job recruiting. I think that's pretty obvious, but over the last week or so, a lot of the, crystal balls and commitments, there just was a run of negative kind of news stories, and that's what I was trying to point out. And part of the reason for that is because it just caught me off guard a little bit because of how successful the staff had been, getting guys on campus and turning those into commitments. So I was a little surprised that some of these guys visited March 25th. For unofficial visits, I know a lot of people on social media, were making, these were just unofficial visits. You're making too big a deal out of unofficial visits.
Well,
Like,
can I say something really quick before I forget?
yeah,
Negative trend. If you're not landing the recruit, you're not necessarily in the positive by adding one. You're negative by losing one. It doesn't mean negative, bad. Oh, we think Matt Rule sucks. Negative means, negative, less. Negative trends, positive, negative, that type of analytical, thing. It doesn't necessarily mean, we hate everybody. We hate Matt Rule. We want him fired. Like, it means literally, quite literally, a negative trend, like going backward for now. It could, increase next week. It could be better next week. It could be worse next week. But, and somebody wrote, do Alabama and Clemson have all these negative trends, or are you guys just writing about Nebraska having negative trends? Yes, of course, Alabama and Clemson have negative trends. That's literally what the word negative means. It means going down or getting less. Sorry, rant over. Chris, you can continue being professional.
yeah, well, but you're right though. There was some. I mean, I think that the fact that Matt Rule sat up there and said, "Hey, the narrative about Garrett McGuire is hurting us on the recruiting trail," I think that shows you right there was a negative trend because he felt the need to address it, and to me, that was pretty clearly connected to the Davon Hall crystal ball and the Isaiah McMorris. And if you think that coaches don't pay attention to the crystal balls, you're wrong. They do. I'm not saying that they put a ton of stock in it, but they know when those crystal balls go up there, and they at least are kind of saying, "Whoa, like maybe Penn State isn't a better spot than I thought," or whatever the case may be. But at any rate, Matt Rule and the Huskers, they got Ashton Murphy on campus this week, and they got a commitment, and that was important. But you're right, there are negative trends. Alabama, Ohio State, went through where, one of the best running backs in their state committed to Michigan, and a bunch of people were freaking out, and then they had a good run. So it's just kind of how things go. And to point out, if Nebraska gets a bunch of positive crystal balls, we're gonna write about that too and say Nebraska's trending in a positive direction. So you just people need to not overreact one way or another, but whatever is happening, we're going to talk about it and analyze it, in a fair minded way, the best way possible. I mean, we're all fans, so that does cloud the judgment at times, but that's just is what it is. But one point I did want to make about people were talking about, oh, guys haven't even taken official visits yet. Well, if you look at the top 20 quarterback rankings according to 24/7 Sports, 17 of the top 20 are committed, 30 of the top 40 are committed, and not a single one of them took an official visit. So official visits aren't what they used to be. Guys are making decisions much earlier now, and if you're waiting for official visits to close, that might be too late. I'm not saying that's not what Nebraska was doing at all with some of these guys, but it was good to see them close with Ashton Murphy this week.
And the whole, signing day, game has changed as well. It's no longer in February. It's, now in December. So the whole landscape of recruiting has changed, and that includes official visits. And it was really good to see them close with Ashton Murphy. Murphy said in an article earlier this week that they project him to be a defensive lineman. So that's interesting. We definitely need more depth on the defensive line. And, you know, although we only have 3 commitments in the 2024 class right now, we have an athlete, an offensive lineman, and defensive lineman. So we're at least diversifying positionally our commitments so far, and I think that's a good sign because I think it's important to be balanced, and that's not something that previous coaching staffs have done on the recruiting trail, in my opinion.
Yeah, Murphy is an interesting player too. I could see him on either side of it. I think that's why they've
Me
left
too.
it open a little bit. But yes, he's got that 6'4", 6'5" frame, and so you could see him being like a 5 technique, 3 technique, or maybe an offensive tackle. So it'll be fun to kind of watch him. But yeah, I mean, right now I think he's listed at like 240. I don't know how real. I'm not sure how close that is, but he probably does have more of a defensive, you know, line body, because man, if you can get a guy that's like 6'5", 280, 290, that's like perfect for that 5 technique type position.
Yeah, and I was just doing a little bit of research here, and he had a very small offer sheet. He had 5 programs. Air Force and Colorado were among them. So, I think it's good to see, Nebraska get another in-state kid, because that's another thing that people gripe about. Oh, we don't have enough in-state kids, and blah blah blah. And I understand he's not at the caliber of Hall or McMorris, but he's still a pretty good player, and you know I tend to look at the numerical rankings that 24/7 Sports gives, and he is just over an 87. So I think he's a very good borderline 4-star recruit, and we'll have to see where he fits in. But I think it was important because he visited on Monday, correct, and committed that day.
I think so, Monday or Tuesday. Yeah, but
Yeah,
he committed the day of his visit, for spring practice, and that was good. He's ranked 5th in the state, in
yeah.
the composite rankings, and I thought it was a good take. Iowa State was also interested in him, and if you let it go too far and get into taking visits, then maybe he doesn't feel prioritized. And I just feel like the staff could sense that they needed some positive momentum, and they got it, because the fact is, with recruiting, perception is reality, and whether people want to agree with that or not, if you have a bunch of top targets that don't go your way or whatever, I mean, just that negative momentum can kind of build up. And so it was good to get some positive momentum. And then a new offer went out to an in-state guy. I'll let you talk about that, since you wrote about it on huskerbigred.com this week. But another top 10 player in the state of Nebraska was offered, if I'm not mistaken.
Ingwerson, he's committed to Penn State, 6'7", and a lot of the high school, film or highlights that I saw, he projected as a tight end. He's very quick, in terms of getting upfield and running after the catch, and he's also has the ability to be physical. And, I could see him, he played both sides of football in high school. I could see him, you know, maybe moving to defensive end, but since Bob Wager recruited him, I think he's probably going to, if he were to commit to Nebraska, you know, be a tight end. And so, we'll have to see if they can flip him. I think he would be a good get. I mean, 6'7" is a great size for a tight end. And, I think that, Wager is going to be a sneakily good recruiter, and he's gonna be able to help Nebraska out. We'll see what happens with his commitment, but I do like the fact that Nebraska is trying to flip some kids, and who knows, maybe they'll be able to flip Ingwerson.
Yeah, I do. I think you said Penn State. He's committed to Pitt, I
Pitt,
believe.
okay, yeah,
But yeah, what's interesting to me, I don't know if there's any, but he plays tight end, and I know they're trying to recruit Carter Nelson. So part of in the back of my mind is wondering, like, if there's some
Carter
sort
Nelson's
of
probably gone.
hedge there. Yeah, that, I mean, he's
I
been
mean,
touring the SEC this week. I don't know, we'll see what happens,
I
but
hope
yeah.
not, but with the way that some of these visit lists are looking, I think Nelson is probably gone. I mean, I'm not sure about Hall, but I'm not really uh seeing positive momentum for Nebraska in terms of him. And then, I think honestly, I think we're gonna have a good class. I don't know if we're gonna um, have the one that maybe some fans envision, but to me, the two recruits that I'm looking for right now are Brandon Baker and Nathaniel Frazier. Because if we land either one of those guys, I would want to land both. But if we land either Baker or Frazier, I mean, those are solid pickups as well. And I believe they are going to visit for the spring game next week, another big visit day. So, I mean, Baker or Frazier are kind of the guys that I'm zeroing in. Are there any other particular recruits that you're zeroing in besides, the obvious Rayola and things like that?
Frazier's definitely one because I think he's pretty winnable. Baker, I think they probably have a better shot than I gave him credit for having maybe last month. So those would be big, recruits. They've got a couple other guys. I think it's Jacob Smith
Mm.
is coming to visit this weekend, actually. This will be his second time out of Connecticut. Kind of looked at as a Notre Dame lean, but, getting him on campus twice in a month is a good thing. And another linebacker, a 4-star linebacker, Ty Anthony Smith from Texas will visit this weekend. So I always like those guys with Texas. He just was at Texas A&M, and they're kind of looked at as one of the favorites. Baylor, TCU, Texas are all involved, a bunch of SEC schools, but this will be his first visit to Nebraska. However, we know that Matt Rule and the staff have great ties to Texas, so we'll see if they can generate some positive momentum in that recruitment. It's weird. Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned Rayola because it seems to me like quarterback recruiting is starting to clear up in 2024. Like Oregon was one of the teams that was in the mix with Rayola. Now they've been projected to get another quarterback. So I think that they have definitely cooled. USC, I think, has even started to focus more on Elijah Brown is his name. He's like the number 6 ranked quarterback in this class. So it really seems like things have narrowed with Rayola, even though, I mean, he hasn't necessarily put out a list or anything. I definitely think it's going to be Georgia or Nebraska. And right now, gun to my head, I definitely would say that it's going to be Georgia, and Nebraska is going to have to go, try to flip Dante Reno. Now, it could be wrong, because we just don't know at this point. Rayola hasn't really. He's been pretty quiet. I mean, he talked about that official visit to Georgia and hasn't made another one to Nebraska. So that's what's got me worried. But we'll see. I definitely think Georgia's the favorite, though. But it doesn't seem like Oregon and USC are as big a factor now as they once were.
One thing I do know is that this recruitment is kind of dragging out a little bit. And so maybe teams are getting fed up with that. Maybe Matt Rule wants, a sure thing in terms of getting a 2024 quarterback to commit. Dante Reno is a good name. I really like him. Obviously we all want Rayola, but, Reno is okay, I'll take him consolation prize to be sad about. He is really, really good. So, and one thing really quickly, you mentioned Jacob Smith is coming. Jared Smith, I believe the program is also recruiting him as well. They're brothers from Connecticut. So, I mean, there's a lot of interesting momentum on the recruiting trail. Don't know what I think about the quarterback position yet. I'm kind of preparing myself for not Rayola and more of a Dante Reno type, but it seems like, it's kind of interesting that everything's quiet on the Rayola front because, I wonder when he's going to make his decision and why it's quieted down so much. I mean, it's kind of interesting, just to see that because, you know, as much as teams want him, they probably don't want to play the waiting game either.
Yeah, you don't want to get left, playing musical chairs without a chair to sit in. So that is one thing. I still am holding out hope that Nebraska can maybe get him for the spring game. Maybe he'll make a surprise trip or something. I do think they need to generate something there. But one thing too, I think that's going to be interesting is if, say, Rayola commits to Georgia, they've already got a quarterback committed in the 2024 class, Ryan Puglisi. I probably am not pronouncing that right. But anyway, he doesn't get talked about a lot, but he's from Connecticut and is the 10th ranked quarterback in the class. So I wonder if he might decommit if Georgia actually goes through and gets Rayola. And that, I'm not saying, I don't know if Nebraska, I don't think has any ties necessarily to that kid, but I think he would be very much, in demand. And So that just could be another name to watch, as I definitely feel like Nebraska would, throw out an offer potentially there. A lot of Big Ten teams have already offered him: Michigan, Michigan State, Minnesota, Ohio State, Rutgers, Penn State. So, I mean, he's got a lot of Big Ten teams after him already. So it would make sense to me. But Dante Reno is going to be one to watch too. And South Carolina is also recruiting another quarterback. So there's kind of that dynamic too. I don't know if they're trying to take two this year, or what the deal is, but I think at the first thing you got to do is actually offer Dante Reno, because it's one thing to follow him on Twitter. Like, you need to actually make the offer and get the kid on campus. Otherwise, it's just much ado about nothing.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree, and it's interesting that Puglisi is from Connecticut, because you've seen Nebraska try to make some headway in the state, so that would kind of make sense in terms of a recruiting plan. And I would imagine, EJ Barthel would be, one of the recruiters for the state. But yeah, no, I think Nebraska should definitely still go for Raiola, but I don't know how much longer they can wait theoretically, or else, a lot of other targets may come off the proverbial board, so to speak. Um, I know we talked about a May or June timeline, but does that timeline still seem kind of match up to you, or do you see it going on longer than that?
I think it'll be June. It still seems like June to me. Um, I feel like he'll take that, official visit to Georgia, maybe to Nebraska if he's still really interested. And then I feel like he'll make a decision shortly after that. So, I mean, it could change. I mean, he could up and decide, hey, I'm done with this and I'm ready to make up my mind. But most of the time, you see a guy take a visit and then he'll make a decision or a commitment within a couple of weeks. Jaden Davis did that with Michigan recently.
Mm-hmm.
Aaron Nolan did that with Ohio State, took a visit. Week later, he committed. So that's kind of the process. Michael Van Buren is one of the top quarterbacks. He's visiting Penn State in June. He's going to announce right after that. Luke Moga is the guy that Oregon's been projected to land. He's visiting later this month. He's going to so I mean, you see a very strong pattern of that. So if Nebraska does not get a visit in June, I would not say that they have any chance of landing Raiola. That's basically where I'm at with it.
I agree, and I think it's good that they're exploring backup options, so to speak, because like you just said, you don't want to, have no plan if plan A doesn't work out. But we'll see. I just want to land a quarterback for the 2024 class. Like we've talked about before, we could go to the transfer portal, and you can get a good quarterback in the transfer portal these days, but you kind of want somebody that you can bring into the program and develop, because development is a hallmark of what good programs do. And if Nebraska wants to be a good program, then they need to develop in-house.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that's why, it's you can't blame these guys for going after Dylan Raiola, but you talk about guys coming off the board, and I've said it before. I do think if they had really put their eggs in Daniel Kaelin's basket, I think he would already be committed. So it is what it is. You have to do what you do, and I'm sure they'll try to make a run at him, but I don't know how receptive he'll be. But at any rate, I do think Nebraska is forming a backup plan at quarterback, and I still believe they'll get a 2024 QB at some point. Just might not be
Yeah.
the one that we all wanted.
I mean, if you surround a quarterback with good playmakers, that can really help them out and, kind of play to their strengths. And Lord knows Nebraska has a lot of good wide receivers, and they have talented running backs, and they're going to get talented tight ends, and they have talented tight ends already. So, I mean, I'm not saying that our quarterback needs to suck, but we don't need to have a 5-star quarterback in order to be successful, in my opinion, because you have a coaching staff that, can get talent at other positions to help out the quarterback.
Yeah, you don't need a 5-star quarterback. What you need is a productive quarterback, and a
Right.
guy that can pick up third downs, can run the balls, not going to turn it over. If you can just get a quarterback to do those things, I mean, yes, you might not win a national championship, but you're going to win a lot of games in the Big Ten. So I agree with that point, and I do think, not that it's completely connected, but I've been, not that I'm there watching, but I've been pleased with what we've seen from Heinrich Harburg.
Mm-hmm.
I think that gives you hope for the future. And,
Mm-hmm.
the nice thing about Jeff Sims is he's probably going to start here for a couple of years. And then you maybe got Harburg. And I do think that there's also been some positive rumblings about, Torres too. And I think that he does have, I mean, there hasn't ever been a question about his arm talent. He's always been a
Yeah.
raw he was a raw prospect when Scott Frost took him. But if you can keep those guys and develop them, and not that I want this, but maybe get like the Logan Smothers and push some of those other guys out. Not because I don't want them to be here, but just because they're taking those reps away, and I just don't think they're ever going to start. So just though they would be a lot more valuable, I think. To me, it would be more valuable having Torres as your third, fourth guy, getting those, and maybe he can just run the scout team or whatever. But I think that quarterback development is something that the Huskers are thinking about, and I do think that we have at least heard some positive things about those young quarterbacks, which we didn't really hear a year ago.
And nobody's left yet, and that's interesting to me too. Nobody's left from the room, so they're at least all buying in somewhat, or else they wouldn't still be here these days. You can go to the transfer portal in like 5 minutes, but no, they're all buying in. Harburg seems to be a good runner, which is something that Matt Rule wants, and I think it's easy for me to glance over, Harburg and Torres and the guys already in the room, but they could end up being pretty productive quarterbacks, and they haven't gotten proper development, and they've kind of been buried on the depth chart, so to speak, either because they weren't developed or, that we didn't put the best players on the field. But, I think with this coaching staff and, type of offense they want to run, that could lend itself to, Smothers style of play, Harburg style of play, because let's be real, standing like a statue in the Mark Whipple offense was helping nobody out. And, I think this new offense will be able to play to the strengths of the quarterbacks in the room already. And maybe this coaching staff can kind of develop what we already have in the room. I'd love to see that and give these kids a chance to play. But I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens in the quarterback room. I do like Sims. I really like what I've seen. Thompson, obviously he's going to be there and be a big part of the program. So I'm not as kind of down on the quarterback room as I was a year ago, because a year ago I saw it as Thompson, and then we're Purdy maybe, and then we're kind of out of luck. But, I think this year I feel a little bit better about things, just based on the competency of the coaching staff.
Yeah, and I think, it also gives you a better opportunity going forward, having those guys developed properly. And, it could be a chance where maybe, Harburg could be a starter here someday, where that maybe didn't seem like it was that possible with the previous staff. So, yeah, I'm going to be excited to watch those guys. Quarterbacks are always big in the spring game, and I'm excited to see Jeff Sims. And I do think that this is a big chance for him, though, to kind of not lock down the starting job, but at least establish himself as kind of the favorite. So that's something I'll be keeping my eyes out or my eyes on during the spring game.
Yeah, and the wide receivers are a position that I'll be looking at. I think there's a lot of bodies there, a lot of talent. We've been hearing a lot of good things about Xavier Betts. Coach McGuire talked about his work ethic and that he's working his tail off, so that's good to hear. I mean, I always thought that he was, a really great player when he was here in his first stint at Nebraska, and apparently Garcia Castaneda has been, practicing well. So I'd love to see those two in particular get fresh starts and, play well for the program. And that just adds to the depth of the room, because there's a lot of depth here. And, I think it's a good problem to have. There were times in other years when we didn't have enough depth at wide receiver at all, and it showed. And now we almost have too much. But, it creates competition. There's a lot of skill players. It's not just filler guys. It's guys that can play football, and I'm excited to see the wide receivers and see how they play.
Yep, there's a lot of guys I'm going to be excited to see, but Xavier Betts definitely is near the top of my list. I do want to transition now over to, it's also been a good week for the basketball program. Like you said, we were kind of waiting for them to make some moves in the transfer portal, and it just happened like, back to back. It was funny because I had posted an article about, Rink Mast and Bryce Williams, and I thought Nebraska was in a good spot for both of them. And then within about 45 minutes, they were both committed. We'll get into that in a second. I'll get to my thoughts, but just what's your instant reaction to these two pickups for Fred Hoiberg and the Huskers?
Well, Mass brings a lot of experience to the Nebraska basketball program. He was the Dutch Basketball League Most Improved Player in 2019 and made the All-Rookie team in 2018. And so, at Bradley, he was named to the third team All Missouri Valley Conference as a sophomore. And, I think the international basketball leagues, because I remember NBA analysts talking about this with Luka Doncic. He was a young kid playing against some very talented players overseas, and those international basketball leagues often help players develop and, get their skills to a higher level than maybe some American players. And, I think Mast, had that experience in the Dutch Basketball League, and I'll be curious to see what his impact is. He's, 6'9", and this was somebody that they definitely needed to land. He provides a little bit of size as well, and I'll be excited to see what he does. And he certainly has the pedigree to play at a high level, and this was something that this was a player that Nebraska basketball needed to land if they wanted to compete next season.
Yeah, they needed a replacement for Derek Walker, especially his low post scoring, and Mass provides that. He averaged almost 14 a game last year for Bradley. He can do a lot offensively. I mean, he can score with his back to the basket. Another thing I really like about him, he's really productive. In the pick and roll game, he can roll to the hoop. He can pick and pop and shoot threes. He can spot up and shoot threes. I think he can play the 4 and the 5. If Nebraska was able to, say they got John Hughley or whatever from Pitt, I don't think they will at this point. I think Mass is going to be the 5 next year. That's just my, projection based off of just his role and everything. But another thing I like about him too, he averaged over 2 assists per game. And so he's a guy that, like Derek Walker, has some playmaking ability and some passing ability. And we generally do see that out of, European big men. They're more skilled passing, and just European players, they tend to emphasize passing and shooting more than American players do, I think, in the development process. So I really like this move. I like he's got 2 years too. And I think that, I like that he wanted to play in the Big Ten. And when Iowa took another big guy, it seemed like a perfect fit for Nebraska. So one of the 2 huge needs that they had, they needed to replace Derek Walker, and they also need a point guard. So they still have to fill that need. But this was a big one that they had to get marked off. So I really, really like it. And he's the number 3 power forward according to, the On3 rankings. So big get for Fred Hoiberg.
Absolutely, and it gives somebody Hoiberg, a player that you can literally plug in and play right away. And I think there's a lot of upside to Mast. I think he fits in Hoiberg's offense very well, and given given Hoiberg's luck with the transfer portal, the one thing I will say is that I think he's done a good job of, finding players that fit the system. And I think Mast is another, player that can do that. I'll be interested to see, you mentioned the pick and roll. I can just see, in theory, Tominaga on that pick and roll. And, I think, like you said, he's a good fit because he can do so many things. He can move without the basketball. He can shoot the basketball. He's exactly the type of player you want in the Nebraska offense.
And he adds, 3-point shooting too. He made
Yeah.
like 0.8 3-pointers per game, so almost 1 3-pointer per game for a 5, which is a pretty high number. And he shot it
Yeah.
at a good percentage, I think, over 35%. And that leads me into, Bryce Williams. And really, I don't know which one of these guys I'm more excited about, because I love Bryce Williams. I love Bryce Williams for Nebraska. I think he's such a good fit. People talked about how Nebraska needed a point guard and a big guy, but they really needed a wing, because at that 3-4 spot, who do you have there? That can guard that. I mean,
Yep.
yes, if you get Hunter Salas, he can play that spot because he's 6'5".
Let's not get greedy now.
But I will get greedy because I do want Hunter Salas. But
I do too. I really do too.
But I mean, my worry was, they're putting a lot on, if you don't get like a guy like Bryce Williams who can play the 4, I'm not saying they got him to be a 4, but I think he can play it. He's 6'7". If Gary's not healthy, then who do you really have? And then you don't really have anybody at that 3 spot. So now I just feel like, okay, if you don't get Hunter Salas, Bryce Williams can start at the 3 for you. He can play some 2 if he has to, although Nebraska's pretty guard heavy, so I don't think he'll need to, but I think he's going to play in that 3-4 role. I like that, even at Charlotte last year, he only started like 15 games. So I think if Fred's like, hey, we're going to make you our sixth man, I think he's totally fine with that. He's got 2 years to go. I think he shot like 39% from three last year. And I think the year before that, he actually shot 43%. He shot more three-pointers last year. So, but to shoot 39% on a pretty high volume number of three-pointers is pretty good. And, these are both mid-major guys. So there is some projection going up to the Big Ten. But I really think that Bryce Williams, I mean, he shoots the heck out of the basketball. And I just really like both of these pieces. And I feel like that they're very versatile. And however the roster construction, fits out, that they're going to fit really well into this roster.
And Williams had 162 rebounds last year for Charlotte as well, so he does have some rebounding ability. And we need another guy that can rebound. And so I really like how this roster is shaping up. I believe we have 2 open slots left, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, 2 open slots, and basically, they've got 4 guys coming for visits still. Javen McCollum is a point guard from Siena. Latrell, I think, Wrightsell from Cal State. He transferred from Cal State Fullerton. He was an Omaha kid, I believe. And then Hunter Salas is going to take his visit. I'm interested to see if John Hughley still visits, because he's going to Oklahoma this weekend, and I feel like if they give him a chance to commit and he gets that starting role, he'll probably take it. I would take him, but I don't know if he's going to want to compete or maybe be a backup guy. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, 2 spots left. I do think that my ideal situation would probably be, Wrightsell and Salas. And then you could have your starting lineup could be, Wrightsell as your lead guard, Tominaga as your 2, Salas as your 3, Juwan Gary, and if he's healthy, as your 4, and Bryce Williams until he gets healthy. If not, and then Rink Mass, and then you've got potentially Bryce Williams off the bench, Jamarcus Lawrence, Sam Hoiberg, Blaze Cada, a lot of those guys. I do think that somebody's going to transfer, maybe CJ Wilcher. So I think that's why you're seeing Nebraska also recruit some 2023 guys, because I think that they're going to wind up adding 5 total players for 2023, because I just don't see, if you add 2 more guards, when is CJ Wilcher going to play? You know what I mean? I don't think he's a bad player. I don't think his role at Nebraska is going to be what he wants it to be. So
I got the sense that Wrightsell and Salas would come together as sort of a package deal. Is there any truth to that, or am I just kind of just spitting things out there? Because I got the sense that from the articles I was reading that Salas and Wrightsell were at least talking about going to Nebraska together. Although I don't know how true that is.
yeah, well, what Wrightsell said, that Nebraska was pitching those guys on playing together, and they played together, not in high school, but like AAU or whatever.
Yep.
So that they were teammates, and so it definitely sounded like Wrightsell was interested in it. Salas, I don't think, has really even given like a public interview about his recruitment at all, or maybe one. I mean, he's talked about who's talked to him, but I don't know that he's actually given quotes to anybody about. And I could be wrong on that.
I really
But
haven't seen any, but just speculation.
I haven't either. I mean, he said where he's visiting, and I think they've gotten intel. The guy from Husker on Robin Washut, he's gotten intel from Salas and some other guys about who's contacted him, but I don't think he's given any quotes about it. Wrightsell did talk about playing together, and I was worried about Creighton, but he's already put out a top 3. Wrightsell has, and it's Nebraska, Minnesota, and Alabama. So I feel like Nebraska's got a good shot with him, and if not, I feel like that they can get that Javian McCollum guy from Siena, and then it's basically, to me, either one of those guards, and you can take over and be your 1, and then Hunter Salas, you've got an ideal spot for him to step in and be the 3. And if he doesn't come, then boom, Bryce Williams can step in and start there. So I feel really good about where Nebraska's roster is, as long as they can get a point guard. I would like Salas because he's that defensive stopper. I mean, it would be nice to have another guy like that, especially on the wing, but it is what it is if they don't get him. However, I feel like they got a pretty good shot right now.
Yeah, and we're certainly, like we said earlier, we're certainly feeling a little bit better than we were a week ago with these transfers. And this is a must-win year for this coaching staff. And I think Williams and Mass, will be able to help out, getting Nebraska some victories and helping them compete in the Big Ten, because truthfully, that's where Nebraska has kind of fallen, in terms of the season. They start out good non-conference play, but once January hits, they kind of struggle. Not last year. They held their own last year, but historically, things have gone bad in the Big Ten. I'll just say this, I don't think we're going to see, you know, I don't know, like 3-10 in the Big Ten like we have in previous years. I think next year we'll probably see more of what we saw this year. But again, it all depends on if Tominaga is going to stay. I mean, that to me is the big domino, and we're going to say it at least 57 more times on these episodes. But if Tominaga stays, then we're in good shape. If he leaves, then I don't know.
Yeah, if he leaves, then Jamarcus Lawrence has to really have a big year, which I think he's definitely capable of doing. I mean,
Oh yeah,
I even worry about him. I am worried about him coming off the bench and like going to the transfer portal because I think he's that good. But we'll see. I hopefully Fred can keep him like if they get Hunter Salas or whatever. But yeah, I think Tominaga, I do think he's going to come back just because I think he's going to view this as his chance to, get to the NBA or have that opportunity. And if the NIL can work out well enough for him, at least he can get some money this year. And then if it doesn't work out, like you can, because man, if you have another good year at Nebraska, that's only going to increase your value, professionally, whether it's in the NBA or Japan or whatever. And so as long as he's getting paid pretty well this year, and I mean, how many people are going to buy the hell out of these jerseys, man? If this guy comes back, like it's probably going to be
I
the
will.
most.
I
Yeah,
will.
I mean, legitimately, it probably is going to be the most bought jersey in Nebraska basketball history if he comes back next season. I don't think that's, hyperbole or, it's so anyway, I do think he'll have a good opportunity to come back, and they get him and Hunter Salas and a point guard. I definitely think this team has enough to make a serious run at the NCAA tournament.
And the one thing I would be worried about with Jamarcus Lawrence is if he would be able to handle a starting role for the entire season. I mean, we know he can play. There's no doubt about that. He can absolutely play, but the amount of games in February and March compared to an entire season of basketball is obviously a little less. So I would just be curious to see if he would be able to play at high levels throughout the entire season. My guess is yes, but you never know. Sometimes you hit a wall over the course of a season, and hopefully Lawrence wouldn't do that. But that's just one of the things that I was just thinking about.
No, it's a good point because you don't want to fall victim to small sample size, and that does happen a lot. So it is a big jump to go from playing, a couple of games, 2 or 3 games to starting and every night and teams are scouting for you. Tom Izzo's got you 1 or 2 on the scouting report, so it does make a difference. And you have to, be able to find more than 1 or 2 ways to score. So,
And that wasn't his fault either. It was Fred's incompetency with the talent he has on the bench, and I'm not going to say lucky injuries because injuries are never good, but injury issues that forced Lawrence to get more playing time, and hopefully it opened Fred's eyes.
yeah, definitely. And, but it worked out. Yeah. With Casey too. So,
Oh yeah.
sometimes it happens as a coach, but anyways, this seems like a good spot to wrap up. I did want to mention it is a big weekend for Nebraska baseball. They're playing Northwestern, who's like 2-9 or something in the conference. So the Huskers really could use a sweep. They're basically the first place team is 7-2. They're 4-2 right now. So if they sweep this weekend, they'll essentially be almost tied for first place in the Big Ten. So that's something to keep an eye out. Of course, every game's on BTN Plus. So I don't know how you're going to watch it unless you either have
I was going to say that
BTN
doesn't help me at all.
Huskers.com always has the broadcast though. So, I mean, baseball is a great sport for the radio.
Yeah.
That might be your best option. But anyways, make sure that you guys, check out all of our content, huskerbigred.com. We'll have, anything on the transfer portal, recruiting stuff, spring football news. We'll have all that type of stuff
Spring game next weekend.
Yeah, spring game next weekend. We'll definitely be, having some look ahead, some previews for that type of stuff. So make sure you guys hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of our videos coming up here next week. Maybe we'll try to put together a playback or a stream for the spring game. I got to check my work schedule.
I know it's so fun doing them by yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be watching the spring game. I just don't know if I'm going to have to be like watching it on my phone while I'm working at covering a softball game or something, so I'm a multitasker.
If not, what I will do is, if not, what I will do is maybe a reaction stream on YouTube or something, or maybe nothing at all, depending on how much interest there is. But I'm very excited for the spring game, and hopefully you'll be able to, we'll be able to get a playback going or something, because that would be cool.
That would be cool. That's the goal. So yeah, we'll let you guys know. I think I'll be able to have a better idea about that on Monday. So also make sure you guys hit the like button, get into the comments, let us know what you think. Hopefully we explained my thoughts on the recruiting a little bit more, so everybody doesn't hate me as much. But sorry to be the bearer of bad news, guys, but it is what it is. So anyways, this was a fun episode. I always love the interactions, even if you guys are calling me a moron, doesn't hurt my feelings. And anyways, I know that everybody loves the Cornhuskers, and that's what it's all about. So
And this
as
is a
always,
crowded space too. This is a crowded space with tons of websites and vlogs and stuff like that. So the fact that you comment on our things, good or bad, we always appreciate it. And we always love reading your opinions, either good or bad, because you guys really like the stuff, and we recognize that. And this is why I like writing and making videos about Nebraska sports.
Heck yeah, man. It's the best fan base in the world. So thank you, Thank for checking out our videos and subscribing. And as always, go Big Red.
Go Big Red.